Today is October 7th, 2024, which means that today marks the 1-year anniversary that Palestinians decided to stand up and fight back against the violent and vicious occupation and apartheid of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel. And it was that day, truly, that Israel was reminded that if you are occupying land illegally, those oppressed people have the right to fight back. And in the case of Palestine, they did. Today, you're going to see a lot of Zionists get online and try to use October 7th and the events that took place today a year ago to justify all the crimes that Israel has committed after that day and even before that day. So if they want to talk about October 7th, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that the Nova Music Festival was supposed to be held in a totally different location, out of harm's way, and a military official moved it to the location that ultimately left them vulnerable to Hamas's attacks. And no one has answered why that was. They also haven't given an explanation as to why it took so long for them to respond on October 7th at the Nova Music Festival, nor why a military official said that those Israelis can quote unquote fend for themselves. We still haven't gotten an explanation as to why Israel initiated the Hannibal Directive and killed their own Israeli citizens via artillery rounds and helicopter fire, despite the fact that their own military admitted that they did it and that they were guilty of this. Or how about the fact that Israeli officials actually obtained documents laying out the exact plans for Hamas that day on October 7th and did absolutely nothing to prepare or prevent the attack. Now, what was important to mention all that, because I need you all to know, Israel is going to play the victim today, and you cannot let them, because they're playing the victim for the following reasons. You see, Israel has been guilty of an all-out genocide since that day on October 7th, and they've been using October 7th and lies fabricated about that day to justify that genocide. And the West has played right along into their hands. Not only did the UN find them guilty of genocide, but they also found them guilty of the sexual assault claims that Israel itself was making, once again reminding us that everything that Israel accuses Palestinians of being, they're actually guilty of. Every accusation is a confession. They'll also point to October 7th to excuse things like their Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners, and then Israel subsequently making the guilty culprits celebrities for raping Palestinian prisoners. Also, somehow the attack on October 7th in Gaza meant that Israel thought they should then invade the West Bank, despite the fact that Hamas is not in the West Bank, nor are any of the hostages. This has, of course, led to hundreds of deaths of Palestinian people who had nothing to do with that day. But even Israelis have felt the wrath of Netanyahu and Zionists. Many of the families of soldiers who were captured that day have been silenced and threatened by the Israeli government, including a mother whose son's grave was basically destroyed because the federal government of Israel wanted her to be silent and she refused to. And these families are speaking out because they believe that Netanyahu has zero interest in actually freeing the hostages and achieving a ceasefire. And they have every reason to believe that because he's shown zero interest in doing so. And many Israeli hostages have come back and said that they felt like their lives were in more danger by the blatant and blind hellfire rained down on Gaza than they felt endangered by Hamas. Somehow, all of these events led Netanyahu to believe, you know what we should do next? We should actually kill Iranian generals by bombing an Iranian embassy in Syria, which is most definitely a war crime. Then decides to start an all-out war with Lebanon by planting explosive devices in pagers, killing and injuring innocent Lebanese civilians. Basically, Israel has not only used October 7th and the lies they've circulated about the events that took place that day to commit genocide in Gaza, but they're using it to spark off what looks like will be World War III. And you have people like Biden who are quick to condemn Hamas, quick to condemn Hezbollah, quick to condemn Iran, but won't condemn Israel for literally anything they've done since the events that took place that day, nor have they condemned Israel for their lack of effort to prevent the attacks from that day from happening. So it's important for us to remember that, first, October 7th did not start on October 7th. It started 70 plus years before that. And those Palestinians had every right to use whatever means necessary within international law in order to get those Palestinian prisoners back from Israel by exchanging the prisoners that they had. But it's also important to remember that October 7th was preventable, and that Israelis died and have been dying at the hands of Israel on that day. And that Netanyahu has refused ceasefire after ceasefire after ceasefire agreement because he's using the conflicts in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and Iran to stay in power. So before you ask yourselves, why did October 7th happen? Maybe you should ask yourselves, did they want October 7th to happen? And if that's the case, not only are Netanyahu and the rest of Israel guilty of genocide, but they might be guilty of something far more sinister. And we need to start addressing that.